Rudy, I guess we should start with the big news because it is big news. The French language debate. It turns out Canadians, if you're a Habs fan, you're the winner because they're going to give you a debate that starts at 6 instead of at 8. So what do you think about this?
Yeah, look, I think it's a good news because you do want people to watch the debate, and obviously, if it was during the Habs game, my choice was easy. If I wasn't a political analyst, for sure I would watch the Habs game. It's not a good news if you're a francophone, for example, living in Western Canada, because 6 o'clock means 4 o'clock or even 3 o'clock if you're on the West Coast. So I don't think there's going to be many francophone outside of Quebec and Ontario or Atlantic who are going to watch it at this time. But it shows you that the importance of hockey and the importance of the fact that they want people to watch that debate. It's going to be the only debate, as you know, in French because the TVA debate was canceled. So I do believe that it's a good decision. But are people going to watch it at 6? I hope so. And definitely people are going to have to switch to hockey for sure.
So I would first of all, we should point out this. This is not a precedent. It's happened once before, back in 2011, right, when Gilles Duceppe was then, I guess, head of the bloc. Do you think this is the right call?
Yeah, I do think it's the right call. But Gilles Duceppe, they actually changed the day of that debate. They switched the day. Now they couldn't because, honestly, we're only 24 hours away. So I'm for sure it would be very, very difficult to reschedule it, especially that it's going to be Easter this weekend, so they cannot do it on Friday,
right.
Forget it Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So that's why I don't think there was another date. The other option was to switch from the English and the French debate, but I do believe that there's some Habs fans that actually speak English, so it would have been the same problem if they would have just switched. I think it was Yves-François Blanchet who said, we can just switch the English and French. But I said, hey, there's some English-speaking Habs fan also. So, but I do believe that, look, it's one way of making sure that people do watch it, or they can always record it and watch it after.
So you have been, in the past involved in these sorts of things. You work with Andrew Scheer back in 2019, yes. Prepping him. So what are they being prepped? All the leaders now, what's the advice to them? What are they watching out for? What pitfalls are they avoiding? What's happening?
So the truth is that they are rehearsing. Normally, that's what we do. We actually rehearse with political staffers or advisors who are role-playing other leaders. For example, during Andrew Scheer's preparation, I was Maxime Bernier at the time. Maxime Bernier was on stage. So we really role-play, try to forecast what are going to be the questions from the anchor, what kind of attack opposition or other parties are going to throw, how to respond, how to be quick on your feet. There's also some techniques. Also, for example, if you feel that one of your opponents is going to attack you or is strong on something, maybe cut him off or actually speak more louder than him. You do that because you don't want him to have the perfect clip. Because you have to understand that, yes, there's going to be a debate tomorrow in French and after in English, but a lot of people are not going to watch the 2 hours long debate. They are sometimes only going to watch some resumes or some summaries or some, for example, some clips. So sometimes what you want is to have a good clip. So sometimes you will see some leaders not exactly answering a question or just making sure that some slogan, for example, or some talking points make it in the news. So it's a kind of a balance. You have to follow what's happening, but you have to have a game plan. Every leader, they have a game plan. They know what they want, what kind of key lines or punchline they want to see in that debate. But the way you're thinking is, what are the expectations? That's how you basically judge, okay, he won or he lost, is a question of managing expectation. Normally what you want to do is to kind of have lower expectation and surpass those expectations. For example, a lot of people have low expectation when it comes to Mark Carney just because of his French level. If he does a good debate, if he's fluent during that debate, for example, he will outperform and people will say, oh, he had a great night. You don't have the same expectation, for example, for Yves-François Blanchet, which French is his mother tongue. So he needs, for example, not only to speak French well, but also, for example, to talk about Bill 21, Bill 96, put, for example, Mr. Carney on the defensive, asking him, why are you going to join, for example, those challenging on the Supreme Court. So every leader have a game plan, want to see some offensive message, for example, the conservative when it comes to cost of living, for example, reminding Canadians about the 8, 9, 10 years legacy of the Liberal government. but at the same time, they need to be prepared because they know that their opponent are maybe going to throw some stuff at them. And one thing that maybe happens during just before a debate, and that's maybe some inside info. I don't know if it's going to happen. It happened for us, for example. Sometimes it's maybe just before the debate at 5 o'clock, there's something that hits the news to basically destabilize one opponent or the other. For example, the news or some candidate have said something that all of a sudden they just make it public 30 minutes or an hour before the debate.
Oh.
So to kind of see if this is going to be brought up during the debate.
And what's it going to be this time, Rudy?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's the funny part. In 2019, for example, we knew that Justin Trudeau had 2 campaign planes. He was not using one plane; he was using 2. Obviously, he was saying that he's pro-environment. So we kept that information for the debate. And during the debate, Andrew Scheer, for example, pointed his finger at Justin Trudeau and said, "What? How dare you talk about the environment? You're using 2 planes," and all of a sudden. So sometimes you kind of have some ammunition for your opponent.
Okay. If I go back to 2019, just really, really quickly, did it work out the way you thought it would when Andrew Scheer was debating?
Yes and no. It worked well, for example, for the story on the planes. It didn't work well, for example, on abortion. There was a question from the anchor on abortion, and Andrew Scheer wasn't convincing enough. And, for example, last time in 2021, I believe, Yves-François Blanchet was asked a question about Bill 21, and it played well for him because the anchor did ask the question, and after he was able to play that for the days after that debate, saying he was attacked. So you can see that sometimes it can come from your opponent, but it also can come from the question of the anchor.
Yeah, that was Shashi Kurl. I mean, that's one of those moments that will never be forgotten, I think, in political history, at least in this province. I would ask you one last thing, and kind of an obvious question. I know that there's a real answer to it. With respect to who has more to lose, so is it about who's ahead in the polls, which means Mark Carney has more to lose, or what do you think?
No, it's a question of what are the objectives. For example, Yves-François Blanchet wants to have at least the balance of power. He doesn't want to have a majority Liberal government. So he needs to send that message, for example, that you cannot trust the Liberals, you cannot give them a blank check. For Mark Carney, he needs to keep, for example, those seats in Quebec. He needs to increase his vote counts in Quebec. So expectations are high, and strategically he wants to do a good performance because he wants to keep seats in Quebec. He wants to show that he knows Quebec, he has sensibility for Quebec, because, for example, in past interviews, he wasn't able to show that feeling. For Pierre Poilievre, it's also the same thing. He has about 10 seats in Quebec, 12. He's aiming for 12, 13 seats. A good performance will be to solidify those seats and making sure that he wins again. Even if Pierre Poilievre does an amazing performance, for example, he's not going to gain 15, 16, or 20 seats. So it's not the same. It's all a question of what do you want to gain. And, for example, for Jagmeet Singh, they only have 1 seat in Quebec. Alexandre Boulris, they want to make sure that he does a good performance and that his MP gets reelected in Quebec.
So just a couple of things before we wrap up. I had this idea that, and I don't know that it's borne out. It has for us in a couple of occasions. Do you think Conservative candidates in some ridings are being held back and told not to make appearances by the leadership of the party?
Sometimes they do. Sometimes you don't. You just look at the risk and reward. The risk is that, for example, he says something that can hurt the leader, for example, if he's not on message. And sometimes just waiting the reward, saying, okay, yes, it's going to make bad news for one day, but imagine if he says something silly or he's not on message, that can really hurt, for example, the leader and basically cancel one day of campaign if the leader needs to roll back, for example, his comments. So that's how you kind of look at every single debate. You're going to say, okay, what is the risk and what is the reward? Sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no.
Last question. We've been talking a lot. I asked our listeners this afternoon about this decision or announcement by Pierre Poilievre on using the notwithstanding clause to deal with, convicted murderers, mass murderers in this country. The reaction has been it's a slippery slope, and that's, sort of a neutral reaction. A lot of people concerned just by the fact that a prime minister, never mind a provincial premier, is thinking of using and opening the notwithstanding clause. Does that become an issue in this debate, do you think?
Yes, I think it's going to be an issue just because, for example, the Bloc Québécois is going to put forward on terms of Bill 21 and Bill 96 and the fact that the Liberal government is against, for example, the use of that clause. So for sure, there can be a question to Pierre Poilievre on this topic if it becomes a topic of discussion. So I do believe that you have to be ready to be. If you're doing those kind of preparation, you basically think of all the possible questions the same way you just did, and each team prepares some answers to that to be ready to respond. When it comes to this, I mean, when it comes to the conservative justice, this is not something new. I mean, they did put forward, for example, minimum sentencing in the past. It got canceled by the Supreme Court. The Liberal government also did C5, which now they call it the Netflix prison sentence. So I do believe it's an issue during the campaign right now, and we'll see if tomorrow it's one of the topics that maybe one opponent, maybe Jagmeet Singh will put that forward, for example.
I would say we have a drinking game already set for tomorrow. It's going to be how many times Pierre Poilievre uses or refers to Justin Trudeau in the entire evening. I don't know what the over-under is for that. That's one of the betting games. If you had to bet on Mark Carney, what he'd be talking about what most of that evening during the debate, what would it be?
Trump. He's going to say Trump, 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 Canada sovereignty, Trump, Trump, Trump.
Okay. We'll keep an eye and an ear on that. Rudy, thank you.